Yeah, very good afternoon to all. I am Professor Anuradha Jain, Professor of Economics at Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies. So in this session, we are going to discuss about balance of payment and how the disequilibrium in the balance of payment takes place and what are the different methods to correct this disequilibrium in the balance of payment. So in the previous session, we discussed about what balance of payment is all about. So just to recall, that balance of payment is a systematic record of transactions between one country and the rest of the world. So it's the systematic record of all the exports, imports, capital transfers that takes place from one country to the rest of the world and from rest of the world to that country itself. So balance of payment can be in surplus, can be in deficit in real sense, even though in accounting sense it is always imbalanced because of the system of the double entry system. So here we are going to discuss like what are the determinants of balance of payment, how the disequilibrium is created in the balance of payment, and what are the ways to correct this disequilibrium in the balance of payment. Now the main cause of disequilibrium in the balance of payment arises from imbalance between exports and imports of goods and services, that is deficit or surplus in the balance of trade. Now exports may be small due to the lack of exportable surplus, which in turn results from low production, or the exports may be small because of the high cost and prices of exportable goods and serve competition in the world market. So for any reason, there can be less of exports from one country to the other country, maybe because the population itself is consuming the entire production, or maybe the cost factor, that the cost of production is high in the country and they are not able to compete in the international market, so there won't be any demand for their products. Now important cause of small exports are the inflation or rising prices in the country or overvalued exchange rate. Now when the price of goods are high in the country, its exports are always discouraged and imports are encouraged because people will prefer to buy imported products more because of the price difference between imported products and the local products. Now if it is not matched by other items in the balance of payment, then disequilibrium will arise in the balance of payment. Now it is often said that balance of payment must always balanced. Now what does it mean? The individuals and business firms of an economy have to pay for the imports from abroad. Now if exports are not sufficient to pay for the imports, then how the balance of payment will be in balance? So deficit on current account implies that the residents of a country are spending more on imports of goods and services than the income they are earning from exports of goods and services. Now for the overall balance of payments to be in balance, this deficit in the current account of the balance of payment must be financed by selling capital assets such as shares and bonds of companies or other assets such as gold or foreign exchange reserves of a country, or by borrowing from abroad. Now both by selling assets or by borrowing from abroad, foreign capital flows into the country, as has been happening in the last several years in India. Now these foreign capital inflows are shown in the capital account of the balance of payment, which must be in surplus to finance the deficit in the current account. So therefore current account deficit plus capital account surplus will become zero, or your balance of payment will be in balance. However, it is worthwhile to note that this balance is in accounting sense only. So surplus on current account can be led to the grant of loans to the other countries by the government, or it can lead to the increase in the reserves of foreign exchange, which show up themselves in the capital account. Now on the other hand, a deficit on current account can be met by capital inflows from abroad, that is by obtaining foreign investment or getting foreign aid, or by drawing from IMF, or by running down countries' foreign exchange reserves. So therefore, surplus or deficit in the current account of a country's balance of payment gives rise to further financial transaction which show up themselves in the capital account. Now, in other words, if the balance of payment is used in the wider sense so as to include external assistance like drawing from IMF, drawing from the country's reserves, also as distinguished from its narrower sense, the balance of payment of a country must always balance. All the receipts taken together must be equal to the payments taken together. Now, the above fact has an important lesson that must be borne in mind. If a country has no foreign currency reserve, or it has no assets to sell or pay for the imports, and if nobody is willing to lend to it, it will have to cut down its imports, which will reduce productive activity in the economy, and which may adversely affect economic growth of the country. Now, such a type of crisis situation arose in India in 1991, when our foreign exchange reserves had fallen to a very, very low level, and no one was willing to lend us or give us the aid at that time. So, in fact, due to loss of confidence in foreign investors, capital outflows were taking place. And that was the reason, in 1991, when India had to mortgage its gold to Bank of England and Central Bank of Japan to get the necessary foreign exchange to pay the needed imports at that time. We had to accept the precondition of IMF for providing us assistance to tide over the crisis. And it is interesting to note that was done under the guidance of Dr. Manmohan Singh, the former Prime Minister of India, who was then the Finance Minister. Now, if we talk about globalization and capital flows and balance of payment, then it is through globalization and openness of the economy that foreign trade of a country increases, which promotes economic growth. Now, trade between countries help them to specialize in the production of goods and services according to their factor endowment and comparative efficiency. But besides, globalization helps in the transfer of technology from the developed countries to the developing countries. Globalization also promotes capital flows between countries, which is in general, are welcomed. Then capital inflows in the form of foreign direct investment adds to productive capacity of a country by increasing capital accumulation in the country. Capital inflows in the form of portfolio investment by FIIs, that is foreign institutional investors, which are invested in buying equity shares and corporate and government bonds, lead to development of financial markets. And besides, capital flows provide foreign exchange which can be used to meet the current account deficit, which generally emerge in a developing country like such as India due to a large import of fuel, machines and industrial raw materials required for industrial growth of the country. But however, the global financial crisis of 2007 to 9, which originated in the subprime housing loan market in the US and enveloped the entire world, has clearly brought out the adverse impact of globalization. But it is adversely affected the growth of exports of developing countries such as India, which brought about large current account deficit. It also caused capital outflows from them, which led to stock market crash later on. When capital flows are large and volatile, they hurt macroeconomic stability also. And large capital inflows, as they occurred in India in 2010, led to appreciation of exchange rate of the national currency, which adversely affected growth of our exports and encourages imports. And as a result, they widen the current account deficit of the country. Now, owing to these adverse effects of globalization, each country decides about the extent of openness of its economy with which it is quite comfortable by imposing some restriction on their foreign trade, especially in the financial services. Now, besides, because of the adverse effect of large capital inflows, some countries are trying to control them by imposing taxes on capital inflows. But India needs larger capital inflow rather than putting any restrictions on the trade. Now, in the year 2008-2009, when there was global financial crisis which caused not only negative growth in our exports but also large capital outflows from the Indian economy, with the result that capital surplus in 2008-9 was quite small and fall short of our current account deficit, which was quite large in the year. And we withdrew from our foreign exchange reserves to meet the current account deficit. But however, in 2012-13, capital inflows from India through foreign direct investment has declined, and our current account deficit, which is estimated to be quite high, has been financed more by volatile capital flows by foreign institutional investment, which is a matter of again serious concern. And this is because these volatile capital flows affect our foreign exchange rate stability, stock market prices, price stability, and thus create macroeconomic instability in the country. We have noted above that when we add up all the demand for foreign currency and all the sources from which it comes, these two amounts are necessarily equal, and thus the overall account of the balance of payment necessarily balance or must always be in equilibrium. Now, as a matter of fact, when we speak of equilibrium or disequilibrium in the balance of payment, we refer to the balance of those parts of the account which do not include accommodating item such as borrowing from IMF, SDRs, or drawing from the reserves of foreign currency held by the central bank. Now, when excluding these accommodating items, there is neither deficit nor surplus in the overall balance of payment. It is said to be in equilibrium. But when is this sense there is either deficit or surplus, the balance of payment is said to be in disequilibrium. The deficit in the balance of payment can be financed by drawings from IMF, use of SDRs, drawing from the reserve of foreign currencies, and loan and aid received from abroad. To finance the deficit, India borrowed from IMF or from other countries, or even resorted to commercial borrowing from abroad. But however, a more important and popular concept of balance of payment equilibrium has been a basic balance. The concept of basic balance is based upon the idea of autonomous items in the balance of payment. Now, what is autonomous item? The autonomous items in the balance of payment are those items which cannot be influenced or changed so easily or quickly by the government, and they are determined by some long-term factors. Now, in this concept of basic balance, besides the items in the current account, the long-term capital movement, both private or government account contained in the capital account balance of payment, are regarded as autonomous. Now, on the other hand, in the capital account, short-term capital movements such as borrowing from IMF or central bank of other countries, drawing from SDR, change in the foreign exchange reserves are transitory and of accommodating nature, and are therefore excluded from the concept of the basic balance in the balance of payment of equilibrium of these payments. So, this recourse has to be made to these accommodating items, also called like some compensatory item, so as to ensure equality between payments and receipts of foreign exchange. So changes in the compensatory items are made so as to offset the surplus or deficit in the autonomous item. Therefore, when autonomous movements cancel out over some appropriate time period and there is no need for compensatory movements, the balance of payment is in equilibrium. So the equilibrium is a state of balance which can be sustained without intervention by the government. Equilibrium is the balance of payment, therefore is a sign of soundness of a country's economy. A continued disequilibrium indicates that country is heading towards economic and financial bankruptcy. So every country therefore must try to maintain balance of payment in equilibrium. And to know like how this can be done involve the study of causes of disequilibrium in the balance of payment. So let us discuss now what are the causes of disequilibrium in the balance of payment. First is cyclical disequilibrium. Now it is caused by the fluctuation in the economic activity or what are known as trade cycles. Now during the period of prosperity, prices of goods fall and income of the people go down. And these changes in the income of the people and prices of goods affect your exports and imports of goods and thereby influence the balance of payment. Second is secular or long run disequilibrium. Now it occurs because of long run and deep seated changes in the economy as it develops from one stage of growth to another stage. So the current account in the balance of payment follows a varying pattern from one stage to the other stage. The secular disequilibrium will occur when either the long-term capital movements get out of adjustment with deep-seated factors affecting saving and investment, or planned savings and investment change without an offsetting change in the movement of long-term capital. Another factor that can cause disequilibrium in the balance of payment is technological disequilibrium. Technological disequilibrium is in the balance of payment which is caused by various technological changes. Technological changes involve like inventions, innovations of new goods or new techniques of production. Now what happens that these technical changes affect the demand for goods and productive factors which in turn influence the various items in the balance of payment. Because if there is technological changes, that the nature of demand for the goods will also change, or maybe that may affect the cost of production, and because of that also demand for the goods changes. And if demand for the goods changes, then that is going to affect the balance of payment, because that will directly or indirectly affect your exports and imports of the goods. Another type of disequilibrium or causes of disequilibrium is the structural disequilibrium. It is caused when a change in demand or supply of goods alters a previously existing equilibrium, or when a change occurs in the basic circumstances under which income is earned or spent abroad, in both cases without the requisite parallel changes elsewhere in the economy. If, for instance, the price of labor is too high, it will be used more sparingly and the country will import highly capital intensive equipment and machinery. And this will lead to disequilibrium in the balance of payment on one hand and unemployment of labor on the other hand. So these were the main reasons for disequilibrium in the balance of payment. Okay, so it can happen because of the technological changes, because of the structural changes in the economy, or because of the change in goods and services for any reason. So how the disequilibrium can be corrected? What are the different ways by which disequilibrium in this balance of payment is corrected? So let us discuss this. So first measure to correct the balance of payment disequilibrium is the trade policy measure. So expanding exports and restraining imports is very, very important measure, to correct the disequilibrium in the balance of payment. So trade policy measures to improve the balance of payment refers to the measures adopted to promote exports and to reduce imports. So, exports may be encouraged by reducing or abolishing export duties or lowering the rate of interest on credit used for financing exports, so that people can easily take finance and buy your exported products or increase their demand for your exports. Then granting subsidies to manufacture and exporters. Okay, then lowering income tax on the exporters to produce and export more goods and services, imposing lower excise duties to make them competitive in the world market. Okay, so these are the different ways through policies, okay, government can promote export industries so that they can produce more products, they can export more in the country. On the other hand, now imports may be reduced by imposing or raising tariff, that is import duties on imports of goods, because if government imposes more duties or raises more duties, then imported products will become costlier. And if imported products are becoming costlier, that means the demand for imported products will go down. And imports may also be restricted through imposing, import quotas, introducing license for imports. Imports of some, inessential items may be totally prohibited. So this can be the various ways for discouraging imports or decreasing imports. Another method is expenditure reducing policy. So that first was related to the trade policies, like how government can influence, more exports, government can motivate, industries, those who are producing export products, or how we can discourage imports. So that was related to the policy matter. Another is expenditure reducing policy. An important way to reduce imports and thereby reduce deficit in balance of payment is to adopt monetary and fiscal policies that aim at reducing aggregate expenditure in the economy. Now, the fall in aggregate expenditure or aggregate demand in the economy works to reduce imports and helps in solving the balance of payment problem. The two important tools of reducing aggregate expenditure are the use of tight monetary policy, because if there is tight monetary policy, less of money supply in the economy. If less money supply, that means that people will have less of purchasing power, and if there is no purchasing power, that means the demand for the products will go down. And second is contractionary fiscal policy, which will also have the similar type of impact on the demand. Now, tight monetary policy is often used to check aggregate expenditure or demand by raising the cost of bank credit and restricting the availability of credit. Contractionary fiscal policy measures an increase in direct tax such as income tax, which will reduce the aggregate expenditure, because if income tax increases, the disposable income will go down and that will lead to fall in the aggregate expenditure. A part of reduction in expenditure may lead to decrease in imports. Increase in indirect tax such as excise duties, sales tax will also cause reduction in the expenditure. Then expenditure switching policies like devaluation, expenditure switching policies work through changes in relative prices. So prices of imports are increased by making domestically produced goods relatively cheaper. Expenditure switching policies may lower the prices of exports, which will encourage exports of a country. So in this way, by changing relative price, expenditure switching policies help in correcting disequilibrium in the balance of payment. The important form of expenditure switching policy is the reduction in foreign exchange rate of the national currency, namely devaluation. So by devaluation, we mean reducing the value of exchange rate of a national currency with respect to the other foreign countries. So it should be remembered that devaluation is made when a country is under fixed exchange rate system and occasionally decides to lower the exchange rate of its currency to improve its balance of payment. Another method is exchange control. So we know that deflation is dangerous. Devaluation has a temporary effect and may provoke others also to devalue. So devaluation also hits the prestige of a country. So these methods are therefore avoided, and instead foreign exchange is controlled by the government. Now, besides, IMF advises member countries how to correct fundamental disequilibrium in the balance of payment when it does arise. It provides a mechanism by which changes in the rates of foreign exchange can be made in an orderly fashion. So, member countries also borrow from IMF for a short period to maintain equilibrium in the balance of payment. Then there are non-monetary measures like export promotion. Okay, so that we have discussed. Import substitution, like steps may be taken to encourage the production of import substitutes, and this will save foreign exchange in the short run by replacing the use of imports by these import substitutes. Another is import control, like import may be kept in check, through adoption of a wide variety of measures like quota, tariff, etc. Then if we talk about the key features of India's BOP in Q1 of 21-22, so India's current account balance recorded as a surplus in US dollar 6.5 billion. Okay, that means 0.9% of GDP in Q1 of 21-22 as against the deficit of $8.1 billion, that is 1% of GDP in Q4 of 2021. And a surplus of $19.1 billion, that means 3.7% of GDP a year ago, that is 2021. So surplus in the current account in the year quarter 21-22 was primarily on account of contraction in the trade deficit to US dollar 30.7 billion and $41.7 billion in the preceding quarter, and an increase in the net services reports. So net services receipts increased both sequentially and on a year basis on the back of robust performance of net exports of computer and business services. Then private transfer receipts, mainly representing remittances by Indian employed overseas, also has shown increase over the year. So in this way you can see that the India's balance of payment situation is improving day by day, but still it is a matter of worry that we have balance of payment deficit, current account deficit, and we should also think about more measures how we can improve upon our balance of payment problems, and how we can promote our exports, how we can promote those industries which are producing export items, and how we should motivate people to go for our own products. And government nowadays are taking various measures, okay, and they are promoting goods produced in our own country. Swadeshi, we are going Swadeshi. We are also promoting small industries, small scale industries, okay, and also the startups in our country, and that will definitely help in controlling the balance of payment of the country. So thank you so much for your patience listening to this session. Thank you.